Okay, in this video, I am going to show you how to do a simple thread retrieval function via automation. This can work for multiple applications. In this instance, we have an AI bot engaging with a lead via social media, and we want to retrieve the user assistant conversation, send it out to our CRM. It's going to be Airtable in this instance. But yeah, this can work in multiple applications, whether it be assistant doing product recommendations, assistant doing fitness recommendation, any sort of assistant user application, you can do this for. And this becomes pretty important when you want to analyze user assistant data for further automation. So this might be, in this case, a sales script generator for what the user has said, making it easier for a sales team to close. Now, what does this look like? So here's a simple Miro board just to sort of visually show you what's going on here. So like I said, in this application, we're doing a lead qualification bot via Facebook. So a lead performs an action. If you've seen my last video, I show you how to make this. So a lead performs an action. This may be a link click, ad response, post comment, any sort of lead action that'll enable an assistant to engage that lead. That's when this process will start. So the assistant is deployed, and this may look a bit confusing, but it's really quite simple. So in my use case, the assistant is deployed, and it's basically just checking whether a lead's qualified or not, and then suggesting a booking link, and then booking. But here's the thing. We want to capture some key data. Now you can do this in ManyChat. You can look at or Meta Ads Manager or Facebook Manager. You can look what conversations you've had, but if you want to manipulate that data, you still have to send it out. So basically, I won't get into sort of the workings of what I went through last video. You can check that out, how that sort of works. But basically, a lead's passed through our assistant conversation. They're either qualified or not. If they're not qualified, an unqualified statement is prompted to the user. Then we have this data point coming off that. And what I mean by that is, what did the user say that prompted them to not be qualified? Data there. If they're qualified, yes, tool enabled, that's the booking link. Booking link provided, did they click it? Data here. This is the data we're capturing of the conversation up to booking link. And then did the lead book, yes or no? No, did they not book? It's the data up to there. Now we have these three key data points that we want to analyze, and they sort of fall under the umbrella into one. Now, if we capture this data, we simply have a conversation that we can capture and run through at a later date. And this may be useful for lead re-engagement, offer, sort of offer improvement and things like that. So this becomes pretty important when you're getting into a more advanced sort of automation system. First and foremost, we'll head over to Airtable. You'll create a base, create a table, and then you'll put in your columns here. Now, being mindful here, your table names, column names, and things like that are case sensitive. So for instance, if you're following this, make sure that you're mindful of the capitalization here. So our table name is threads. The data we want to capture falls under these columns: thread ID, last modified, full name, user input. So you'll create these. So firstly, thread ID, then last modified. To create last modified, you'll just hit add. You'll name it last modified, or just scroll down, last modified time. Specific fields. Find a field, and you're basing it on the thread ID. So when that thread ID comes in, it'll give a time. And this is important for a reason I'll show you in a bit. So that's how you create it. Use selected field, then create field, and then you're going to get your last modified column here. Again, you'll get your full name and user input. After you've created your Airtable, you need to know your API key. Now you find that by going to your account here, Developer Hub. It'll put you into a different tab. Then you'll create a new token. This is one here that I'm using now. Create your new token, you can name it whatever you want. Scope is gonna be create, edit, and delete records. This is important. And then you add your base here, the one we're working on. Once you got all that, we'll head over to ManyChat and we'll send some preliminary data into Airtable now that will then be used by our function to get this user input. So now jumping over to ManyChat, which will be our second step. If you've seen my last video, you'll recognize this template here. So if you got something different set up, but you have your assistant running through your ManyChat, you'll have a create thread action here. Now this is important. Wherever you have a create thread action, you'll be able to use this. So in ManyChat, for example, we have created a thread here after this user action is completed. And basically what we're gonna do here is send this thread along with some other fields to Airtable so we can then do an automation. So your post request URL is gonna be your Airtable link. This is gonna be your base ID followed by your table name. So if we come back here, you see this is our table name up here and our base ID is up here. You'll add your authorizations as in any API request. So it's going to be authorization followed by bearer, and then that's going to be, you can't see it all here, so it won't matter. That's going to be your Airtable API key. Your next header is going to be content type, application JSON. And then in your body, what we're sending to Airtable is going to be some fields here. So 2 fields here, most importantly, thread ID. You'll send your thread ID, so you can set it up the same way. You'll just go thread ID, quotation marks, you can add a field here. Come down to custom user, if you have some, thread ID. This is the thread ID, and then you can put your full name in there or some other data, however you want to set it up. This response doesn't really matter, but as long as it's a post request, you got your URL set up properly, authorization, content type, and you're sending the correct data. So hit save on that. That's all good for now. So when we initiate this, this automation, it's going to send our thread ID and our full name. So after you've set up your Airtable and your ManyChat so that your ManyChat is sending the correct fields over to Airtable, you'll head over to the link in the description to your Replit template. So that's what you see here. This is a Replit template that took me about 8 hours yesterday to get working really efficiently and the least complex sort of application here. So quickly going through it, when you click my Replit template, you'll get a screen where it will say fork and run. You'll hit fork and run, and then it'll bring you to this editorial view here. You'll need to put in your secret. So like last video, you'll put in your open API key. That'll go in here. And then you're pretty much good to go. So save that secret, and we'll just run through this really quickly. So it's a simple function. We're getting the thread conversation. It's listing that conversation. Now, typically when you do this, it'll be structured in a way that the last message is first. So the last message in that user assistant conversation will be first. So we want to do it how you read. So it'll be earliest to last. That's why we have this response data reverse thing here that'll reverse it. And then we got a few things down here to make sure the formatting's nice, so to add new lines and stuff like that. It'll return your conversation, and then we just got some error handling here. Down here is our endpoint to handle our post requests. This will be happening from make. We'll get into that in a second. So not really important down here. Just some console logs down here, and we're good to go. So all you have to do in here is put in your open API key. You'll hit run. Don't worry about all this stuff on the side. It looks a bit complicated. This is because I've run this before. You'll hit run. You'll have a web view here. Again, like if you've seen the last video, we'll launch this in a new tab. And then that is going to get our URL here. You'll copy this URL, and then we're ready for the next step. So you've got your URL from Replit. Now after this, we need to head over to Make. If you're not familiar with Make, I would recommend watching a video on how Make modules work, how to set up scenarios, stuff like that, how to do connections, things like that. But to save some time in this video, I've got the modules pre-made, so I'm not going through each sort of module and taking up a lot of time. But this is pretty easy. So you'll set up your first module, watch records in Airtable. Basically what this module means is that it's just looking for data incoming into Airtable. You'll set up your connections, you'll put your base, your table, and your trigger field. Now this trigger field, remember when we created our column names in Airtable, is this last modified. This is important to assign each record ID with a time, so that each time the automation runs, it's getting the newest record that's been created. So last modified, and the label field is the one we're trying to capture. So thread ID. Next, you'll get the record. Now, this is simply just the record ID because we're getting multiple data fields here. So same thing, set up your connection, your base, your table, and you want to be capturing the record ID, not the thread ID, but the record ID from our last module. Once you got that, you're good to make your API request. And remember, this is our URL that we've just copied. So this is going to be a post method. You'll paste in your URL followed by / get conversation. That's what you see here. So when you have that pasted in, make sure it's a post request because we're sending data to the function. Set up your headers here, content type, application.json. Body type is raw. Again, application / JSON. And now we need to request this content. So we're sending our thread ID into our function. Make sure this is the thread ID from module 2. Once that's all good, we are good to go. You'll set up a new module. This is getting the data from our function and then updating it into our Airtable. So again, setting up your connections here, your base, your table. Record ID is ID from module 11. And then we're updating our column names. So what we want here is to update our user input with the data that's outputted from this function. So when you run this function, it'll receive your thread ID. It'll go through a series of code to list the conversation, reverse it, structure it in a nice and tidy way, and then it'll spit out in the form of data. That's what we're capturing here in this last module, data, and that's important. When you run this at first, you'll get a response that'll show you the data you're capturing, and then you can do this this module here pretty easily. But that's basically it. So when you have your scenarios set up, you can go through and test this now. Now let's hop over to Facebook, see if it's working. So this will be whatever your your user action is. So if you saw the last video, again, this is the bot we made. Comment. We'll get our chat dialog popping up here. I'll just type in a few things just so we can actually record some data. Ready to dive in, blah, 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 blah. Okay, that should be enough. We'll get a response here really quick. Okay, cool. As you see, reload this. That's run through our ManyChat, which will give us some data here. So when this reloads, there we go. So you see here, that's the time, thread ID, modified, and our name. All you'll have to do now, and you can do this so when it detects it, it automatically runs through this. It's just however you set up your scheduling. We'll just run through this. If you see green, that is cool. Head over there and bang, you have your user input, and that's literally just the conversation we just had. So that is how you do thread retrieval for an assistant user application. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope this was easy to follow. Let me know if it wasn't in the comments below, and I can respond to some of you guys. Thanks.